What is good, Josh on the Smooth Game Man, back with yet another reaction video with me. Today, y'all see what I got in my hand. The Uchiha, I'm not gonna take it out, for YouTube. But my Uchiha Sasuke, if you know, you know. But today you can see by the title, man, we got Chidori versus Rasengan. That's why I had to bring something Uchiha oriented, other than Itachi's eyeball in the room, as well as Naruto back there too as well. And we're gonna be talking about what the strongest jutsu is between the two. It's, one of the most debated upon things, which one is stronger. I feel like a lot of instances point to the Rasengan being stronger. I feel like there's some cases where you can say that Chidori is stronger, or just maybe situations where the Chidori is better. But overall, which one's going to be stronger? That's what we're going to be coming in here to check out today. So we'll be watching the video. Link to the original will be down below. I'm going to go ahead and say now, regardless of what is said, my personal opinion will always be that Chidori is stronger, or at least that I would rather be able to use the Chidori than the Rasengan. So let me know down below, which one would you rather use if you could only use one, the Chidori or the Rasengan? Which one would you rather use? Let's argue about it down below in the comment section respectfully, because there will be no slander against the Chidori down below. But as long as it's all in good Naruto fun, I'm here for it. Let's get into the heat.
Chidori or Rasengan? Which is better? It's one of the oldest arguments in the Naruto fandom. And that's because for as long as these two jutsus have existed, they've been pitted against each other. The Rasengan, a blunt force, massive chakra swirling in your hand, and the Chidori, an actually collapsed Rasengan with lightning release applied to it. One created by Minato, one created by his student Kakashi, passed down to the new generation in Sasuke and Naruto. These two jutsu could not be more different. But if you take a step back and remove all of your biases, which in this conversation is a bit tough for me to do, but I'm gonna do it, and look at not only all the variants of the Chidori and the Rasengan, but also the pros and cons to each jutsu, at the end of the day, which is stronger? Which is more useful? Which would you be better served learning if you were plopped into the Naruto universe? And those questions are exactly what we're gonna be trying to answer today, because today we're talking Chidori versus Rasengan, which is the ultimate technique. But before we get to crowning an ultimate hand-based jutsu, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional NC Hammer 23 video a week, guys, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We're on to the Forest of Death, and Orochimaru has given Sasuke his magical hickey and dipped. But before we...
What would y'all think if I did something like that? Found a way to live stream, whether it's on... Probably couldn't even do it on Twitch. I probably have to do something like, I guess, whatever the fourth wall is. Like, we just live stream me watching an actual full live episode. Would you guys would you guys be interested in that? Like, even though some of the newer animes, or just watching, I'll rewatch Naruto every day of my life. If I need, I'll rewatch the whole series in 1 week. But I'm doing like 2 episodes a day. I'll do the whole series in just 1 week, take a whole week off of work, and just watch Naruto for a week straight.
So, today we are pitting two A-ranked jutsus against each other. Before we get to seeing which of these two jutsus is truly the greatest, I want to set a couple of ground rules. We are going to be talking about all variations of the Chidori and all variations of the Rasengan. That means for Chidori, we're not only talking about the Chidori, but also the Raikiri, because effectively they are the exact same thing. And for the Rasengan, we're going to be talking about all of its variants, like the Rasen Shuriken and even Rasengan Uzuhiko. But Nick, are you going to be including Purple Lightning? Maybe? It is a completely separate jutsu modeled after Madara's mouth lasers that Kakashi made after the 4th grade Shinobi World War because he didn't have a Sharingan anymore. And does it have Chidori in the name? I feel weird about adding it, but it is very obviously modeled directly after the Chidori and operates exactly like a Chidori. You just don't need a Sharingan for it. So I don't really know. I'll make a game time decision when we're talking about the drawbacks of the Sharingan. But now that I've brought up one of the things that we are going to be talking about today, let's go over how we're going to be approaching today's video. We're going to start by talking about the Rasengan and the Chidori, both in their base forms, what pros come with them, what cons come with them, and how they're used, and their respective APs.
So
we are then going to talk about all of the variants of the Rasengan and the Chidori, and how those variants either add pros or cons to either the Chidori or the Rasengan side of the argument.
And isn't this kind of, I feel like it's kind of bad, because the Rasengan has so many different, depending on how specific you get with the variants. Don't the Rasengan have like way more? Massive Ball Rasengan, Sage Mode Rasengan, Giant Massive Sage Mode Rasengan, Massive Sage Mode Rasengan, all the elements are released Rasengans, Rasen Shuriken, all the elements are released Rasen Shurikens. Like, there is a lot of different variants of the Rasengan. We're gonna be talking about that for a good minute if we're getting that specific.
Lastly, we're going to talk about the absolute strongest we've ever seen, either a Chidori or a Rasengan be. Therefore, identifying what these respective jutsus APs top out at. And then only after we've gone over all of that information will we render a verdict which is better, the Rasengan or the Chidori. So now that all of the rules and the formatting are out of the way, let's get into the actual conversation and get talking about these two jutsus in their base forms. See, fundamentally, these two jutsu have always been intertwined, as a Chidori is actually just a collapsed Rasengan. See, Kakashi, as a student of Minato, not only learned how to use the Rasengan, a jutsu that Minato created, but also, like Minato, identified that the Rasengan itself was an incomplete jutsu. See, we know that Minato twice tried to apply some form of nature release to the Rasengan, but was unsuccessful in both endeavors. After this, Kakashi, ever confident that he'd be able to usurp his mentor's efforts, tried to apply lightning release to the Rasengan. However, when he applied it, he collapsed the form of the ball of the Rasengan and made the Chidori, creating a ball of lightning in his hand that slowly but surely over the course of Naruto kind of just evolved into lightning wrapping around his hand. He used to hold Chidori. He doesn't anymore. Now, because one of these jutsus has an elemental release applied to them and the other doesn't, that's inherently kind of an advantage for the Chidori. Because, yes, Kakashi and Minato were correct. The Rasengan was not a completed jutsu. While the blunt force trauma that a Rasengan is able to inflict on somebody is sometimes potentially deadly, any and all contact with a Chidori to a major part of your body is guaranteed to be deadly. Ask Rin or Haku. And yet, over the course of part 1 of Naruto, the Rasengan is often talked about as more powerful than the Chidori, as not only does Jiraiya in chapter 143 of Naruto say that the Rasengan is more powerful than the Chidori, but many would tell you that Sasuke himself believed that the Rasengan was more powerful than the Chidori after he and Naruto were thrown into their respective water tanks. Yeah. However, I wouldn't necessarily agree with this assessment. See, Sasuke never says, oh, Naruto's Rasengan is more powerful than my Chidori. Rather, in this moment, Sasuke is just furious about how much progress Naruto has made, while seemingly he feels he's made none.
Oh, but Nick, Naruto did way more damage to the water tank than Sasuke did.
I mean, like, kind of. Yes, does Naruto blow the back out of that water tank? 100%. While Sasuke simply punches a hole in the front of it with his Chidori. However, quite honestly, this is less impressive for the Rasengan and more just a really good way to illustrate how these two different jutsu work very differently. See, the Chidori operates essentially like a sword, a sharp application of lightning release that's able to slash their opponents at maximum speeds. But the Rasengan operates more like buckshot. Or maybe even more aptly, like a beanbag being fired from a shotgun. See, because Rasengan usually doesn't inflict any kind of entry wound. However, the force of the Rasengan echoes through the body of whoever is hit and explodes out the back. This means that the majority of the energy inflicted on somebody that's hit with a Rasengan actually doesn't really stay inside them. And therefore, in essence, the Rasengan in its base form is kind of just like a really, really strong punch, while the Chidori more operates like a blade. And therefore, if you want to talk about which jutsu has the better chance of killing the person that you're laying a hit on, well, it's probably the Chidori. See, because while the Rasengan is able to take all of the circling chakra you've placed in this incredibly tightly packed ball and grind it into the chest of whoever you hit it with, launching them backwards until eventually they fly into some kind of other obstacle like a tree or a rock, the Chidori doesn't push back the opponent at all and rather focuses all of the energy at punching through the opponent. And thus, these two jutsus are perfect for the two people who use them. As the Rasengan is rarely deadly, Kabuto can attest to that, while the Chidori is almost always deadly. Sasuke and Kakashi can attest to that. And thus, if you want to be a pacifist who knocks out their opponents, then the Rasengan would be the better choice. But if you're looking for deadly and precise force, then go with the Chidori. But Nick, some of you are saying right now, the Chidori has drawbacks that the Rasengan simply doesn't have, and you're right. The Chidori is all but unusable unless you have some kind of dojutsu or sage mode to counteract the tunnel vision that you get when using it. See, because while yes, the Chidori does grant the user an insane amount of strength that allows for them to strike faster than most people would be able to dodge, it does force the user to attack in a relatively straight line. But because of the speed that the user attacks with and the fact that they can only attack in a straight line, it causes the user's vision to tunnel, making them incredibly susceptible to counterattacks should their opponent dodge. On top of this, the Chidori is incredibly chakra depletive, with Part 1 Kakashi only able to use Chidori about 4 times a day, and Part 1 Sasuke only able to use it twice. While in Part 1 of Naruto, Naruto's able to use the Rasengan, well, I guess about as many times as he likes, but Naruto isn't exactly the best metric. People like Jiraiya, Minato, and Kakashi have never really shown any kind of fatigue when using the Rasengan. And while people like Minato and Jiraiya are also not the best metrics to try and measure just how chakra depletive a certain jutsu is, stands to reason if a Chidori is a collapsed version of a Rasengan with additional chakra added to it, that a Chidori would cost more chakra than a Rasengan. But Nick, all of this kind of complicates things. We've now identified that the Chidori is deadlier and faster, but requires more chakra, and that the Rasengan does less damage, yes, but is more versatile and has way less drawbacks. So what's the better jutsu? Well, the answer's relatively straightforward. In base form, just the Rasengan and the Chidori. If you have a Sharingan, the Chidori is the better option. Yes, the combination of the usage of the Sharingan and the Chidori is incredibly chakra depleted, but the speed given to a Chidori user and the instant kill ability that the Chidori offers is why Kakashi called it the perfect weapon for assassination. Even though it screams like 1,000 birds every time you use it, which to me would disqualify it being the perfect assassination weapon, but who am I to disagree with Kakashi? However, if you don't have a Sharingan, then the Rasengan is the better option. And while some of you might be saying, yeah, no duh, Nick, I'm sorry, but that's just the truth of the matter. The Chidori is a better jutsu for those who can use it, but the Rasengan, though it is weaker than the Chidori, is more accessible to a wider audience of people. Well then, Nick, earlier didn't you say you were going to take Purple Lightning into consideration? And yeah, if you want to take Purple Lightning into consideration here and say that everybody has the ability to essentially use the Chidori, then Purple Lightning is better than a base Rasengan, as it essentially operates in the exact same way that a Rasengan operates, that is, say that you can run around with it in all directions, except now instead of just a massive chakra in your hands, you have a ball full of lightning that you can use to either electrify weapons or just cut through people. 2 things that objectively the base Rasengan cannot do. But don't worry, the Rasengan absolutely learned how to cut people, because the Rasengan got a whole lot of variants. By my count, there are 35, yes, 35 variants of the Rasengan. And
I told you there's a lot, depending on how deeply in depth you go. There's a lot of Rasengans.
Guess what? That doesn't include the Rasen Shuriken. Now this brings up an interesting moral dilemma of whether or not we should consider the Rasen Shuriken in the first place at all. I mean, the Rasen Shuriken does have a separate name, and it does require an additional bit of shape release to be applied to a Rasengan. However, if the criteria for disqualifying the Rasen Shuriken...
I'm about to say, okay, I can see why you'd want to, because if you're going to... Right, because all a Chidori is Rasengan with lightning release, then... that is a Chidori, or that is a Rasengan with wind release. So maybe it should be its own separate category. We should be talking about all 3 together, but it's used the same exact way most of the time. Like, he does throw it occasionally, but a lot of times he still be jamming that thing in your back. No cap. No diddy.
Was that, it's got a new shape release and it has an additional elemental release applied to it, and therefore it is not a Rasengan by consideration. Well, then that would also disqualify some of the higher end Chidori variants. So we are going to be considering the Rasen Shuriken. Now in Naruto, Rasengan variants really only boil down into a couple of camps. Bigger Rasengan, many Rasengan, or something in the Rasengan. Now your bigger camp is things like the Big Ball Rasengan and the Ultra Big Ball Rasengan. But don't get that mixed up with the Planetary Rasengan, because the Planetary Rasengan actually falls into the many Rasengan camp, as it's not called planetary because it's so incredibly large, but rather because it's a big Rasengan that is being orbited by smaller Rasengan for some reason. And there are a lot of variants in this many Rasengan camp, like big ball spiraling serial spheres. Yeah, try saying that 5 times fast. The technique that Konohamaru just used against Matsuri to blow away the majority of her body, using 2 big ball Rasengan simultaneously. There's also things like, and I'm gonna have to read this one, I'm sorry, Sage Art many ultra big ball spiraling serial spheres. Basically any single time a Rasengan does something that it...
Bro, who did Minato name all these Rasengans, bruh? Or did Naruto just get his naming skills from Minato? I think that's the one thing, or one of the few things that he picked up from Minato.
Has it done before, it gets a new name. Like the spiraling absorption sphere, when Naruto just made a Rasengan and then used all of his 9 tails to take a bunch of white Zetsu and press them into the Rasengan,
They
and
really
that,
give
and that
it a
got a
different
name. And the
name.
third camp of Rasengan variants is things inside the Rasengan. Now, the Rasengan itself actually doesn't get that much variancy, as the only two releases that actually ever get applied to the actual Rasengan itself
Wind and
are
light.
Wind Release to make the Wind Release Rasengan. Yes, it was the Wind Release Rasengan before it was the Wind Release Rasen Shuriken, and Magna Release that Naruto used in the battle against Jubidara to not only inflict some pretty massive wounds, but also seal Jubidara and his Limbo clones. Now, we do also see things like the Tailed Beast Rasengan, but that's not really a nature release. That's positive and negative chakra. But still, when we get into the camps of things added to the Rasengan, that's where we really start to see the true variancy come through. Now, obviously, something like a Tailed Beast Rasengan is incredibly redundant. There's nothing really that a Tailed Beast Ball Rasengan can accomplish that a regular Tailed Beast Ball couldn't. It's a hat on a hat. And as Naruto has shown the ability to create and hold Tailed Beast Balls, the idea that for some reason he has to wrap a Tailed Beast Ball in a Rasengan just seems redundant. However, with the addition of things like Wind Release to his Rasengan, Naruto gains something that Sasuke didn't have for a long time. Well, at least so far as it came to their iconic jutsu, which was a long-range option. See, Naruto, by applying his nature affinity of Wind Release to a Rasengan, was able to throw said Rasengan, with the first version of this that Naruto was able to use being the Wind Release Rasengan. However, after making another shadow clone to apply additional shape release to the Wind Release Rasengan, Naruto was, with time, able to create the Wind Release Rasen Shuriken. This is where the Rasengan turned from a very powerful punch to a deadly long-range option, because the Wind Release Rasen Shuriken didn't only just grind into its opponents like the Rasengan, it sliced straight through them, allowing for Naruto to do things like sniping Kakuzu out of the air, destroying several of his masks, and cut Jubidara and the entirety of the 5-kilometer-wide Divine Tree in half. See, the pure destructive force that Naruto is able to funnel into these Rasen Shuriken allows for the Rasengan to become a massively more versatile jutsu. However, it is by far and away the most chakra depletive jutsu out of any of the ones we're going to talk about today, because before chakra constraints got thrown out the window and everybody was able to do everything infinitely, Naruto was only able to make 3 Rasen Shuriken before tiring himself out, and that's Naruto. He was only able to use 2 Rasen Shuriken per Sage Mode transformation, but just being able to cut isn't what makes the Rasen Shuriken so insanely broken. See, because when the Rasen Shuriken comes into contact with somebody's body, it cuts them on a cellular level, disconnecting their cells from their chakra circulatory system. The damage is so incredibly intense that Tsunade actually likens the damage to that of poison, saying that the damage of the Rasen Shuriken hitting somebody can be so incredibly severe that it can strip their ability to use chakra. Ties into the fact that Naruto is able to use every single Kekkei that belongs to any of the 9-tailed beasts in his Rasen Shuriken, as we saw in his battle against Kaguya, that being Lava Release, Magna Release, Boil Release, and a couple of other variants that got visual designs but never names. And the amount of things that Naruto can do with the Rasengan, and therefore by extension the Rasen Shuriken, becomes pretty close to unlimited, at least within the confines of the Naruto universe. And yes, obviously he can use his 6-path super big ball Rasen Shuriken or something like that, an ability so powerful it was able to counter the sheer offensive output of Indra's arrow, something that Sasuke could only do once, and therefore something that would easily be able to level an entire village, if not an entire country, if it were to hit the ground. And thus traditional scalers tend to put Naruto somewhere in the planetary to solar system level in terms of AP at his absolute max, that being Baryon mode. But how much of that has to do with Naruto and how much of that has to do with the Rasengan? Well, here's the thing. Earlier we were talking about the drawbacks of the Chidori, that being that the only people that are able to get the full usefulness out of a Chidori are those with Sharingan. But over the grand history of Naruto, there have been exponentially more people with Sharingan or Byakugan or some form of Sage Mode that would be able to counteract the tunnel vision inflicted by using the Chidori than there have been people like Naruto. See, Naruto was able to make the Rasengan a solar system level attack because Naruto was able to fuse his chakra with Kurama's to make something called Baryon mode that operates like nuclear fusion. He's able to make Rasengan that can counter out Indra's arrow because they're filled with tailed beast balls, and also super amped with Sage of Six Paths chakra. So how much of that is the Rasengan and how much is Naruto? See, this is the important thing to think about, because today we're not talking about Naruto versus Sasuke, we're talking about the Rasengan versus the Chidori. Sasuke is considered to have a planet plus level AP, and a lot of that has to do with his Chidori, his iconic move, whether it be applied to his body or his perfect Susanoo. And thus, while considering what the peak power of what the Rasengan and the Chidori are able to accomplish in the respective hands of Naruto and Sasuke is important, it's important to take into consideration what these jutsus have accomplished in the hands of others. And we've seen the Chidori and certainly the Rasengan used by a myriad of other people. In the case of the Rasengan, those people being Minato, Kakashi, Jiraiya, Konohamaru, Boruto. And thus in the hands of those other people, what was the Rasengan able to accomplish? And the answer is still a lot, but not nearly as much as Naruto is able to accomplish.
Okay.
See, we touched on it earlier, but Konohamaru was able to use 2 simultaneous big ball Rasengan to destroy the majority of Matsuru's body in one fell swoop. And as Matsuru was able to dispatch of Gaara, Shinki, Araya, and Yodo all simultaneously, Gaara was shown going toe-to-toe with the likes of Kinshiki and Momoshiki. This seems to imply that Konohamaru, who's probably our median level of Rasengan user, was able to inflict an insane amount of damage on a ridiculously high level opponent. In fact, even being able to destroy the majority of Matsuru's body, surprise feat or not, puts Konohamaru in the category of small planet level AP, with just the Rasengan, mind you.
Keep in mind, bro, I would have never, if you watch when Konohamaru first gets introduced in like those first couple episodes, even going to when he was like a kid, when Naruto came back and whooped him in the tuning exam, and you said, oh yeah, one day he's gonna be small planetary level, I'd laugh at you, right? I'd be like saying Krillin small planetary level.
No Jinchuriki form, no tailed beast balls, no Sage of Six Paths chakra,
It's
just
all
the
good natured
Rasengan in the hands of a semi-high level Jonin. And listen, if you don't like that scaling, I'm
level.
sorry. Complain to Boruto, not me. Konohamaru also showed us an entirely new way to use the Rasengan with Rasen Barricade, a technique that allows for him to use the swirling nature of the Rasengan's chakra to make a kind of chakra wall. The Konohamaru, mind you, is able to use to block a Chidori from Hidari, who for all intents and purposes should be stronger than adult Sasuke. And if we're assuming that adult Sasuke with his Chidori as an AP somewhere in the region of planet level, that means that blocking this kind of Chidori with a Rasen Barricade means it confers something in the region of a planet level durability. Now yes, Hidari himself admitted that he wasn't able to use the Chidori as well as he could have if he had the Sharingan, but we can't scale exactly what that means for how hard the Chidori was gonna hit. Tie all this into the fact that Konohamaru's student Boruto invented the Rasengan Uzuhiko, which allows for him to tap into the rotational and centrifugal forces of an entire planet and blow that into somebody's chest, not only instantly evaporating anybody hit with it if he has enough time to charge the power, as it stated that it had an unlimited amount of potential in terms of power output. Also, if you're not instantly evaporated by being hit by essentially a spinning planet, there is the residual effect of dizziness that slowly but surely kills somebody the longer they're affected by it. And as so far, there is technically nothing special about Boruto, at least so far as we currently understand. Yes, I know he has the Jogan, but we don't know why he has it or what it does. And yes, I know he has the karma marking, but every single time we've ever seen him use Rasengan Uzuhiko, he hasn't been using his karma marking, and the karma marking doesn't work like an 8 trigram seal, so it's not like Boruto is tapping into Momoshiki's chakra. But then what we're seeing when Naruto accesses the power of the Rasengan Uzuhiko is just a very high-level ninja using a variant of the Rasengan. And kind of like with a tailed beast ball, the amount of power that's able to be delivered with Rasengan Uzuhiko is technically limitless. So what happens when 2 different main characters in 2 different universes make a singular jutsu their main jutsu? Well, you get a pretty insane amount of variancy. However, 2 different secondary protagonists have also made the Chidori their main jutsu in 2 different stories, so it also has a fair amount of variancy, but admittedly less than the Rasengan. Chidori variancies fall into 3 camps as well: long range, swords, or MS abilities. As the Chidori is essentially just a handful of lightning release, it can often be applied to swords, like when Sasuke uses Chidori Current to apply lightning release to his sword of Kusanagi, making the already legendary blade even more deadly, as now it's able to cut through things like other people's swords. However, Sasuke doesn't even necessarily need a sword to pull off something like this, as Chidori Sharp Spear also allows for Sasuke to make a spear of Chidori from his hand that he can use to do things like stabbing Orochimaru through a door, or just as a substitute blade to block other people's incoming slashes. Now this in itself gives Sasuke a pretty good medium range option, as he's able to extend this Chidori Sharp Spear pretty far, a couple of meters if not 10 or so, which not only gives Sasuke, or I guess any Chidori user, a fair amount of range, but also variancy in how long their strikes are gonna be, meaning if you believe you're out of the range of this incoming slash attack, the slash can simply get longer and still reach you. But I still wouldn't consider Chidori Sharp Spear in the long range options for Chidori, because there's really only 2 jutsu that exist within the confines of long range Chidori, and those are Chidori Senbon, which is just Senbon made out of lightning release, and lightning release Lightning Beast Tracking Fang, which is a technique used by Kakashi to make a wolf of sorts out of lightning that dashes at its opponents. And once it comes into contact with them, it's able to sink its lightning fangs into its opponent, not only delivering a massive load of lightning current, but also slicing into them. Now, I wouldn't say that either of these techniques are as versatile as the Rasen Shuriken, or
Not
it does
close,
mean
but
that
they are
Chidori
cool.
users
They're
don't
cooler,
necessarily
though.
have to
So I'm
lunge
showing
at their
Team
opponents
Chidori.
to land attacks. They can use what amount to be lightning summonings, variable lightning blades, or lightning senbon to attack people from a distance. And while none of those techniques are able to deliver the amount of firepower that something like a lava release Rasen Shuriken can, feasibly, those are all techniques that should be available to any user of the Chidori, and therefore, by extension, maybe any user of purple lightning. Something like lava release Rasen Shuriken is something available to Naruto and Naruto alone. But since we're talking about high-level moves that are only available to a certain subsection of people, the third camp of variants within the Chidori grouping are MS variants. Now, like with long range, there's only two of these variants, and those two variants are Kagutsuchi and Kamui. Two absurdly deadly things to add to a Chidori. See, in the case of Kagutsuchi, Sasuke is able to cover his Chidori blade in his Kagutsuchi Amaterasu flames. Well, they're Amaterasu flames that they're applied to his hand through Kagutsuchi. Now, this, kind of like a tailed beast Rasengan, is also kind of gilding the lily, because there's a fair chance that if Sasuke comes into contact with anybody with his Chidori, they're already dead. But let's say hypothetically you're able to dodge his Chidori, but just barely, and it nicks your arm. This pretty much ensures that any and all contact with Sasuke's Chidori is a death blow, as the Amaterasu flames would creep onto your skin, and slowly but surely you would burn until you were nothing but ash. Unless, like the fourth Raikage, you sliced off whatever part of your body that came into contact with the Chidori immediately. However, in the case of the Kamui Raikiri, you would not be so lucky, as if any of the Kamui Raikiri comes into contact with you, you are immediately transported to the Kamui dimension. And assuming you don't have any space-time ninjutsu abilities, you're stuck there for as long as Kakashi or Obito, I guess, want you there. Ties into the fact that the Chidori can be used in conjunction with the Susanoo, and the offensive capability of the Chidori gets pretty close to the peak offensive capability of the Rasengan, with technically more people able to use it. See, well, yes, we only ever see two people apply a Chidori of sorts to a Susanoo, and those two people are Kakashi and Sasuke. We only ever see one person use a Rasen Shuriken, period, and that's Naruto. See, Naruto and Boruto are the only people that have ever been able to apply an elemental release to a Rasengan ever, let alone shape transformation and an elemental release simultaneously, let alone a Kekkei Genkai. However, there's really no reason for us to believe that any Susanoo user couldn't apply a Chidori to their Susanoo. They would just have to learn Chidori. But considering the fact that Minato and Kakashi, two of the most accomplished ninjas of all time, weren't able to apply elemental release of any kind to the Rasengan, seems to imply that the Rasengan at its highest level is much harder to achieve than the Chidori at its highest level. Because, like we established earlier, you really shouldn't be using the Chidori unless you have the Sharingan, and if you have the Sharingan, you have an okayish chance at awakening a Susanoo one day. So with all of this in consideration, which is the better out of these two jutsu? Well, unfortunately, it's the Rasengan. See, when it comes down to it, the Rasengan just has a way bigger bag than the Chidori. Oh yes, the Chidori is able to accomplish things that the Rasengan never could, like electrifying blades in order to make them sharper. Unfortunately, anybody with lightning release can accomplish this, as we've seen Killer B do it, and he doesn't know the Chidori. Outside of this, applying chakra to a blade to make its reach extendable is something that anybody can do with a chakra weapon. Asuma's chakra blades and all of the samurai from the Land of Iron are a testament to this fact. On top of this, lightning release Lightning Beast Tracking Fang is actually the worst iteration of that type of jutsu we've seen in Naruto, as Darui in the 4th Great Shinobi World War shows off Black Panther, which is essentially exactly that jutsu, but faster and imbued with the black lightning of the Land of Lightning. And while the Susanoo Chidori used by Sasuke was able to cut down 20-kilometer wide meteors created by Jubidara, meaning that every single strike from Sasuke was a country-level attack, when we consider the fact that a Chidori from Sarada was able to grievously wound Hidari but not destroy his entire body, but a dual-fisted Rasengan from Konohamaru was able to almost blow Matsuri entirely away, it seems that even in the new gen, the Rasengan seems to pack more of a punch. Now, yes, one was a surprise feat. However, I would reckon that Hidari was also surprised by Sarada busting out the Chidori. Tie all this into the fact that Boruto, by passively adding his lightning release to a Rasengan, was not only able to make a just Rasengan throwable, but also invisible after thrown, as well as the infinite potential of Rasengan Uzukiko, and the now ridiculously well-rounded defensive mechanism of the Rasen Barricade, and it's hard to find a way that Kamui as a jutsu could be considered greater than that of the Rasengan. And even if you consider Purple Lightning and the fact that it can be used by people who don't have a Sharingan, like Boruto, we've only ever really seen purple lightning
Look at that.
used kind
Look how
of
little
like
that
that of a
is, and then
Raikiri
just
or
disappear.
Chidori, with even Boruto just using it to electrify Sasuke's blade. So when it comes down to it, unfortunately the Rasengan's just more versatile, and it appears to have a higher AP cap. On top of this, more people are able to use it, even with the consideration of purple lightning. But if somebody's using purple lightning, that means that they don't have the Sharingan and therefore can't access the highest level of the Chidori's abilities, like the Susanoo Chidori. It also means that they're not able to apply things like Kamui or Kakatsuchi to their Chidori, or I guess in this circumstance, their purple lightning. Now, is this a surprising result? No, it's the jutsu of the main characters of two separate stories. Of course, it's going to be better in a head-to-head matchup. But for those of you saying right now, oh, but Nick, lightning release is weak to wind release, and therefore anytime the Chidori has ever been shown equal to the Rasengan, it was actually the Chidori that was greater. Well, good job, you know, ball. In the majority of the clashes between a Rasengan and a Chidori, we were talking about a base Rasengan and a base Chidori. Both times that Naruto and Sasuke went iconic jutsu to iconic jutsu in the Valley of the End, Naruto was using just a regular Rasengan, not a wind release Rasengan. And really the only pertinent time that Naruto and Sasuke went wind release to lightning release was when Sasuke used Indra's arrow, and Naruto used some iteration of Rasen Shuriken Tailed Beast Ball Sage of Six Paths nonsense. However, Indra's arrow is not a Chidori technique, and thus really can't be considered for today's video. But yeah, that's all I got. But what do you guys think? If you had to...
Nice. Like I said, I did feel like they were going to say, that's why I wanted to preface beforehand and say, like, get out the way. Like, regardless of what was said, I'm still personally going to go ahead and go with my boy Chidori. But let me know down below. Do you guys agree with that? Do you guys feel like the Rasengan actually is stronger? I would say so, just because all the different variant uses, the fact that more people could actually physically use it. It's not as chocolate draining to use some of like the base forms of it. Even at a base, Chidori is just going to drain you more than anything else. And then the Rasengan you can actually use without draining yourself too bad. Like I said, just being able to spin somebody in a circle and then all the pressure just shoot out their back, especially if they shoot into a wall and that just gets vibrated back into them. It's gonna hurt. You know what I'm saying? Like, obviously the Chidori is gonna kill you instantly though. You're not, well, I guess Rin was alive for a little bit, felt a little bit of that pain, but Chidori is gonna kill you. Rasengan is gonna kind of like severely injure you, make you wish you were dead. So it depends on what your moral mentality is like on which one you guys would want to use. I'm still rocking with Team Chidori though. Let me know what you guys are rocking with down below. It'll be Uchiha forever. Sorry, Naruto. But catch you guys in the next video, man. Let me know what you guys think down below. We'll talk about it down below. Any other anime videos you want your boy to check out, let me know. And we got those anime reviews coming up. I did 3 of them last week, and we should have 3 more coming up, I think, next week too as well. Trying to get some of this stuff recorded while I'll be going away on my birthday vacation. So wish your boy happy birthday too as well on the socials, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. It's me, your boy Sean. This will get back up King Leo. Love every single one of you guys that have subscribed as we're on that road to 10K. Peace.